7 major accidents, 5 plane crashes, all in just 30 days. January 2025 turned into one of the deadliest months in modern aviation. Around 300 people were killed and hundreds were hurt. Fires on the runway, jets colliding in midair, even a private medevac smashing into a neighborhood. It all happened in the same short window of time. But why? Were these disasters connected in some hidden way? And now, everyone is still worrying if the problem has been fixed or if we are still boarding planes with the same risks today. Let's find out. The crashes. The nightmare began just before the new year with Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243. This Embraer E190 was supposed to land in Grozny, Russia, but instead it became the first sign of what was about to be a disastrous month. The crew was already dealing with terrible weather. Snow and poor visibility were making the approaches almost impossible. On top of that, their jeeps was jammed, which was likely electronic interference from military operations in the region. Even the backup radio navigation aids were unreliable. They were trying to land a jet with their instruments going haywire and no clear runway in sight. Then came the sound that changed everything. They heard a sonic boom on the cockpit voice recorder. Within seconds, all 3 hydraulic systems failed. The controls froze. The cabin depressurized. It was total chaos. Flight attendants even reported to the cockpit that 2 seats had literally exploded. The pilots thought maybe they had hit a bird, but the preliminary report revealed that a missile fragment had hit the plane. It was collateral damage as Russian forces were scanning the skies for Ukrainian drones. With no normal controls left, the crew had one desperate tool, which was engine thrust. By pushing one engine harder than the other, they could barely steer. For more than an hour, they fought to keep the jet in the air. They guided it across the Caspian Sea toward Aktau, Kazakhstan. It's almost unbelievable. They managed to lower the landing gear and even extend some flaps, but control was slipping away. At 6:27 in the morning, about 5 kilometers short of the runway, the aircraft slammed into the ground. Out of 67 people on board, 38 died, including both pilots. The rest survived thanks only to the sheer determination of that cockpit crew. Let's be clear here. Most pilots would not have been able to keep that jet flying for over an hour with no hydraulics. It was a miracle, as much as a tragedy. Just 3 days later, on January 2nd, it looked like luck had finally shifted. PAL Airlines Flight 259, a Dash 8 operating for Air Canada, was coming in for a nighttime landing in Halifax. As the plane touched down, the left landing gear collapsed. This accident sent the wing and engine scraping the runway in a shower of sparks and fire. It was terrifying for everyone witnessing the incident, but thankfully, no one died. Later investigations showed the aircraft had blown a tire on takeoff, which went unnoticed. The damaged tire unbalanced the landing gear and unlocked the leg on landing. It could have ended much worse, but all 77 passengers and crew escaped without injury. For a moment, it felt like maybe that would be the final scare of the holiday season, but the very next day proved otherwise. On December 29, Jeju Air Flight 2216 ended in one of the worst aviation disasters South Korea has ever seen. The 737 came in with its landing gear still retracted. It smashed down on the runway at Muan Airport, then shot off the end at high speed straight into a concrete embankment. The explosion was violent, and the aircraft was destroyed almost instantly. Out of 181 people on board, only 2 survived, who were both cabin crew seated in the rear. 179 lives were lost in seconds. This single accident set the tone for the horror to come. Weeks later, when many thought the worst might be over, another scare made it to the news. On January 28, Air Busan Flight 391 was boarding for Hong Kong at Busan Airport when smoke suddenly began rising from the rear of the cabin. A fire spread quickly. Pushback stopped immediately, and the captain ordered an emergency evacuation. 176 people escaped, but 27 were injured sliding down the emergency chutes. The real tragedy was that the firefighters battled the blaze for more than an hour, but the Airbus A321 was completely destroyed. No lives were lost, but the images of passengers fleeing a burning plane on the tarmac shook the nation. Investigators soon revealed that the incident had happened due to lithium batteries. It was possibly a power bank stowed in the overhead bins, which was the likely culprit. If that wasn't enough, the very next day brought the worst air disaster in the United States in over a decade. On January 29, American Airlines Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines, was on approach to Washington National Airport. Controllers had switched the pilots to a circling approach. This was not something they had prepared for. They did it as the traffic built up in the busy airspace. At the same time, a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter was flying along the Potomac River at low altitude on a training mission. That helicopter created the confusion. The helicopter crew reported they had the jet in sight. Controllers cleared them to pass behind the CRJ-700, but at just 325 feet, there was no room for error. The helicopter and the aircraft collided, and the collision was catastrophic. The jet slammed into the helicopter midair, and both plunged into the Potomac. All 67 people on board both aircraft were killed. There was not a single survivor. This crash was the first fatal passenger airline accident on U.S. soil since the Colgan air disaster back in 2009. And still, the horror was not over. On January 31st, tragedy struck Philadelphia. MedJet's Flight 056, a Learjet 55 operating as a medical transport, took off from Northeast Philadelphia with 2 pilots, a doctor, a paramedic, a child patient, and her mother on board. Minutes later, the aircraft spiraled down into a residential neighborhood. The crash destroyed homes, killed all 6 on board, and took the lives of 2 people on the ground. At least 23 others on the ground were injured. A medevac flight, which was meant to save lives, became the closing tragedy in a month already overflowing with disaster. The connection between the accidents. So where does that leave us? We have just walked through 7 major events in roughly a month. It feels like a pattern. But is it one? If you try to tie all of these together with one neat answer, you will be wrong. These were different aircraft in different countries, in different phases of flight, and in different failure modes. The only thing they share is the calendar. Take the Azerbaijani 191st as an example. A crew fought failing navigation, bad weather, and what now looks like war-related damage. The hydraulics died, the controls froze, the cabin lost pressure, and they still kept that jet flying across the Caspian using engine thrust alone. That sits in a category of its own, and that category was hostile airspace risk. Flying near active military operations is always dangerous. That's not new. It's awful, but it's not a system-wide commercial aviation flaw. Now, if we jump to Halifax, a blown tire on departure went unnoticed, set up a vibration, and the 8's gear collapsed on landing. That's maintenance, inspection, and crew awareness territory. It's serious, but it's not the same world as missile fragments and frozen controls. Next, Jeju Air at Muan. It included a gear-up touchdown, runway overrun, and concrete embankment. This one points us toward procedures, cockpit alerts, and airport design questions. Again, different chain, different factors. Air Busan 391 is another lane entirely. The accident occurred due to a fire during pushback. The quick policy change about power banks and overhead bins tells you where investigators are looking. Lithium battery risk. We have known for years that hidden batteries can turn a cabin or cargo hold into a fire zone if they short or go into thermal runaway. That's not a runway overrun story. That's a dangerous goods story. It lives in its own box. Then the Potomac midair. You can already guess the themes: airspace design, ATC workload, frequency coordination, and see and avoid at night. The FAA quickly imposed helicopter route and separation restrictions afterward. It was smart and necessary, but this is still not the same kind of failure as a lithium fire or a war zone fragment strike. Finally, the Philadelphia medevac. Until recorders, data, and labs do their work, we don't know if this is mechanical, icing, or instrument issues. It belongs in the hard investigation bucket. Do you see the problem here? We have 6 different buckets: war risk, maintenance inspection, procedural, alerting, and runway environment, lithium battery fire, airspace ATC separation, and an unclear medevac incident. That's why blanket answers don't help. It's also why aviation safety actually works. Investigators break events down into their parts, fix the weak links, and feed those fixes back into training, hardware, and rules. But we are human. We hunt for patterns because patterns make us feel in control. Our brains try to connect dots even when the dots don't belong together. That's dangerous. It pushes us to speculate before the facts are in. If you need a reminder of how bad that can get, think back to the Boeing 737 MAX timeline. After the first crash, a lot of people assumed that pilot error was the main cause. Boeing's messaging suggested the existing runaway stabilizer checklist was enough. It wasn't. MCAS behaved in ways that did not match a classic runaway, and the second crash made that painfully clear. The lesson here is that we should never guess and never blame the most convenient target. We should wait for data, then fix what the data proves is broken. That's exactly how we should treat January 2025. Now, what about regulators? Are they moving? Sometimes fast, sometimes slow. After the Potomac collision, helicopter routes and separation rules around DCA were tightened right away. That's what you want to see: immediate risk controls, while the long report is in progress. The bigger issue is follow-through. Safety boards publish recommendations. Agencies prioritize and implement. Historically, some items stay there. January should push the slower items back to the top of the list, especially anything tied to controller staffing, mixed traffic management, and runway safety systems. Let's also talk briefly about batteries. Consumer tech got cheaper, stronger, and hotter, quite literally. Phones, tablets, and power banks pack serious energy. Put a damaged cell in an overhead bin, buried under coats, and it can start a fire where crews cannot reach fast. That's why airlines keep adjusting rules. You have to keep batteries on your person, know where they are, and if something smokes, cool it, contain it, and monitor it. And now a word on training and design. Every crash sharpens at least one blade. Procedures, checklists, alerts, or hardware. If an alert was easy to miss, it gets louder or more obvious. If a checklist is too long, it gets trimmed and reordered. If a runway end is unforgiving, EMAS or other arresting features get discussed. The feedback loop is real. It's slow sometimes, but it's relentless. None of this matters unless we resist the urge to solve January with a hot take. You might have heard the quick theories like it was all ATC, or it was pilot training, or it was just Boeing. It's easy to say, but also wrong to say. Each event needs its own root cause tree. What failed, why it failed, and how to prevent it next time. Some trees won't share a branch with others, and that's okay. Now back to the numbers you care about. What's the risk today? Has anything changed since these crashes? Yes, locally and tactically. DCA airspace rules tightened. Airlines in Korea are re-messaging battery rules and evacuation readiness. Operators who watched Halifax will re-emphasize tire, gear checks, and cockpit briefings about abnormal vibrations. And every pilot who read the Azerbaijan prelim will feel that small, quiet chill about routes near conflict, jamming, and backup nav, and will brief alternates with more edge. Does that mean you should be scared to fly? The reason these events shook the world is that aviation is so safe that clusters stand out. The baseline is extremely low risk. But what do you think? If you look at the full list, which of the issues should get top priority so it doesn't happen again? Share your opinion with us in the comment section below. And before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the latest aviation updates. We will keep you in the loop. Goodbye for now.